I grew up in the coalfields of southern West Virginia, so I had a pretty unique upbringing where the men and women that worked around me were in a high-risk industry, and a lot of them were injured, a lot of them were killed. So as I was growing up, I got to see how families struggled as a result of things that went wrong in a dangerous workplace.
Welcome to The Legal Edge, Marketing Smarter for Law Firms, the podcast where we sit down with innovators and leaders that are shaping the future of the practice of law and law firm growth. I'm your host, Rob Rosasco, and today we're diving into what it really takes to build and scale a successful law firm. Joining me today is Tim Bailey, a partner at Bailey, Javins Carter, a highly successful law firm with a strong reputation in personal injury and catastrophic workplace injuries. Tim has firsthand experience in growing a law firm, building a strong brand, and leading a team's success. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Tim, many law firm owners and attorneys dream of building a successful law firm, much like yours, but very few understand what it actually takes to grow a law firm from a solo practice into a legal powerhouse with a national reach. You've been through this journey yourself, and today we'd like to learn from your experience or your experiences. So let's talk a little bit about your background initially. Tim, what led you into the practice of law, and how exactly did you get started with the firm of Bailey, Javins Carter?
I grew up in the coalfields of southern West Virginia, so I had a pretty unique upbringing where the men and women that worked around me were in a high-risk industry, and a lot of them were injured, a lot of them were killed. So as I was growing up, I got to see how families struggled as a result of things that went wrong in a dangerous workplace. So as I decided to practice law, I had an opportunity to stay in West Virginia and actually work for the people I grew up with. I always loved coal mining. I love coal miners. I would sit around and listen to my grandfather tell stories about being in the mines, and my dad, my uncles, and there was something fascinating about that culture. And I'll say I soaked up some of it, and so became very interested in it. My dad made it very clear, though, after he had left college to go into the mines because of how much money you could make, the price he paid physically, my dad made it very clear to me that I was not going to make that choice. So as I went off to college and then became a lawyer, all of a sudden I was able to represent those folks. And then because I'd been so interested in the mechanics of what goes on underground, I was able to pick up on the nomenclature of what goes on in that industry and a bunch of other industries that are very dangerous. Timbering, folks who work on power lines and construction sites. So I was very fortunate that I was able to take my upbringing and my natural interest into the practice of law.
So thinking back, what was your initial vision for the firm when you first started, and how has that evolved over time?
I started like a lot of guys that wind up in the personal injury side of the practice. I started off on the defense side, and here I was, a young law student. I'd done fairly well in law school and got a really nice offer from a defense firm that was going to help me pay off my student loans. Mm-hmm. And I worked there for a while, but I knew a couple of things. I knew that I wanted to be on the plaintiff side. And secondly, it takes time to go from a young associate that's doing legal research and writing to being on your feet and getting to talk to judges and juries. So I wanted to change sides, and I was a little impatient to go through the process of waiting out my turn. I went to a small law firm that did a lot of Social Security and workers' comp work for the kind of workers I was interested in working with, and learned a lot there because they turned me loose, and as a young lawyer, let me do the PI work that came along and companioned with the workers' comp and Social Security. So that idea of taking an administrative law practice and using that as the feeder system for a PI practice, that's where I learned that. I learned that from Mick Robinson and Linda Rice. I was fortunate enough that we started getting bigger and bigger cases. Their business model was the investment that it takes to get into some of the more catastrophic cases. At one point, I was getting the work, and I thought, I'd like to do this on my own if I'm getting the work. I went solo. I broke away from that firm. They understood. I left on good terms. Now, that's one thing I will tell anyone in the practice is always do your best to be straightforward and let folks know where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough that when I left, they started to refer me cases. I went off on my own and shared office space with two fabulous lawyers that were already doing catastrophic injury work, exactly what I wanted to do. And I was doing sort of the lower level work and some courthouse work. I was doing anything I could to pay the bills, but I was also getting some fairly good cases. And I was very successful for that first couple of years as I look back on it. And out of nowhere, one of the partners got a phone call one day, and I was sitting in the office when the phone call came in. Senator Robert Byrd called and said, "There's a federal judgeship available, and I'd like you to take it." So all of a sudden, this partner, you don't say no to an offer like that. Before he left, the two partners approached me and said, "Look, you've already been working so closely with us. You understand our system. We've seen you in action. We also understand that you've had to run your own practice already. So that's a valuable tool that not everyone brings into a firm. Would you be willing to consider de facto, it's a merger?" Here I was on my own, doing well, but the opportunity to join this firm, I was going to be able to focus on only the cases I loved. And it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. That was back in 1996. And I've been with that firm in its different variations ever since.
Okay. Now, just out of curiosity, how long between graduation from law school and when you joined this firm? How much time elapsed?
I graduated law school in 1991.
Okay.
Was with a defense firm for a couple of years. That took me to 93. And then from 93 to 95, I was with this small workers' compensation Social Security firm.
Yep.
And then towards the end of 95, I left. And so I had a little bit of 95 and all of 96. And I didn't get the offer to join up with those guys until the very end of 96.
Gotcha. So a little over 5 years after law school. Okay.
Looking back, it seemed like it took quite a while to get to that spot. But if you put it in the context of my entire career now, it did take me long to branch off on my own and find my way where I was going to wind up.
Exactly. And that's what I was thinking. It sounds like it seemed to go relatively smoothly for you considering the short period of time as compared to your entire career. But I know there must have been challenges. Share with us a little bit about a few of those challenges that you faced back in the early days.
So imagine graduating law school with student loans. I took a pay cut to go to a plaintiff's firm. A lot of folks don't realize that because you're not getting paid by the hour, a lot of plaintiff's firms' salaries are lower. Now, the plus side of that is you get paid based on results on the plaintiff side. So if you're with a successful plaintiff's firm, they will tell you, hey, we may not be able to pay you as much per month, but if we all pitch in together and have a good year, we can make that up to you in a year-end bonus or maybe a huge case comes in. So you have to be a little bit of an entrepreneur and a little bit of a risk taker.
Mm-hmm.
When I got to the point when I was with the workers' compensation Social Security practice where I thought I'd outgrown it and I had to be on my own, I had not squirreled away a whole bunch of money, but also knew that if I was going to do this, I needed to do it then. One of the things I worried about was if I continued there and then bought a bigger house, had my first child, I would find myself in a situation where I was, for lack of a better word, trapped to where I couldn't branch off and take the risk.
Yep.
I had and thank God she's still married to me. I don't know why, but she's still married to me. I had a very supportive wife, and we sat down and we worked up a budget for what it would take to run it for 2 years. We figured that if I couldn't make it within 2 years, I'd better figure out something else. And I'd be back working for a firm. We worked out a budget, and I had some family support. So my father-in-law and my grandfather-in-law were both very supportive when they heard that I was thinking about doing this. But they wanted a business plan, and they wanted to see a budget. We agreed that they would assist me financially each quarter until I got on my feet. I signed a note. It was an arm's length transaction. I had a little bit of money, and a lot of people back in the day and even today had a credit card, and I had an account at, I can't remember if it was Office Depot or Office Max or one of those places. I can remember buying my first office furniture. I went to Sam's Club and bought office furniture. I went up to the Home Depot and was buying my first computer and it was exciting. I still have some of my first business cards when I opened my own practice. Thankfully, I made more money in my first year than I thought I was going to make. I had enough money with the help of my family, my in-laws, and what I was making. I made it. When I was asked to join the firm that I'm still with today, I was in good financial shape. I wasn't on my back. I wasn't on the ropes. And I was able to pay back every dime I ever borrowed from you.
Good for you. Good for you, not only for being able to pay it back, but for having that support too. It's really important.
I will tell you, I know several folks that are very successful lawyers and can basically look back and say their family stepped up and didn't give them the money, but said, hey, we'll take this risk with you, and it worked out great for me.
Yeah, good for you. So talk a little bit about, again, looking back, what's been one of the most defining moments in your career that sort of helped shape the trajectory of your career path and perhaps even how it integrated with you joining that firm?
I think there were two things I'd probably like to discuss when I think about pivotal points early on that get me to where we're sitting here today, to where you're actually asking me to pontificate about what happened to me. The first thing is the experience I had at that workers' compensation Social Security practice.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to decide when you're going to build a practice, you got to pick your model. And I think people don't think enough about what's your model going to be. Before you start a practice, you got to look in the mirror and who am I? Who do I want to be? Now, it could be you've got it all worked out. Could be that, you're okay where you are, but you know what you want to become.
Uh-huh.
And so if you look at the world and you say, man, I want to be a huge advertiser and gather up, and I want to do it in volume, you got to build a different practice. A lot of folks don't realize that the staffing and logistics of that type of practice is a whole different world. A mass tort practice, same thing. Very heavy on call centers and staff and support. Do you want to be a litigation boutique? Do you just want to litigate one-off cases? So you have to think about, what are you shooting for? What market are you going after? And marketing, and love my clients, but my clients are in a market that I've chosen to be in. One of the big mistakes that I think folks make is they let other people define what success and what type of practice they need to be in. They believe success is, I need to be the guy up on TV bringing in all the cases, or I need to be the guy that's doing all these mass torts, or I got to have a jet. I've got to have 3 houses. You have to figure out where you want to take it. Now, what I learned at that Social Security workers' comp practice was one of the ways to get cases was advertise, but there are certain types of cases that are so niche that the person on the street is not even going to realize they have a cause of action.
Right.
So if you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to do an ad? We hadn't even got to the social media world. How do you craft something where folks can say, oh, that's the lawyer I need to go see for that? One of the things that I learned was when someone got injured on the job badly, the first thing that they had to think about was, how do I support my family right now?
Right.
They weren't thinking about, man, if I could find someone like Tim Bailey to take my case, I'd be okay. They thought, hey, I need to file a workers' compensation claim, because if I file that claim, I get these temporary total disability benefits and I get my wages partially replaced. And if they're hurt really badly, then they think they can't go back to work, then they'll want to file a Social Security claim.
Right.
So it's not the fact that they knew that there was a chance to bring a product liability case, or they could maybe, under certain special circumstances, even sue their employer for what happened to them. They just know that they have lost their ability to support their family, and they've got to do something about it. So they go to a Social Security or a workers' compensation firm. When I joined, at that time it was Busey and Chambers, their business model was they had a lot of referring lawyers that referred them cases. Some were workers' comp lawyers, but some were just other lawyers in smaller markets that referred them work because they could finance all the experts and the litigation expenses. But when I joined, I very quickly just started to preach, look, if we want to get all these cases, we don't need to spend a bunch of money. We need to be in the yellow pages because everybody's in the yellow pages. But we don't need to be up on TV. We need to identify in every major market in West Virginia the heavy hitter workers' comp Social Security practitioners. And we need to form relationships with those folks, and we need to have them understand that all they've got to do is refer cases to us, and they can help us, because we need to make sure that those clients can survive on the workers' comp Social Security while we can litigate a case that may take 2 years.
Right.
So it was a very complementary situation. Lee Javins, who became my law partner, who was hired about the same time I came on with this firm, he grew up in the same part of the state. He understood this. And so we approached at one of our firm meetings, the head man at that time, Guy Busey, and we're like, look, here's the plan. Lee Javins and I are going to go do a roadshow. And what we were able to do, just by happenstance, if we were to look over the list of clients that the firm had represented in the last 4 or 5 years, we had the workers' compensation records, so we also knew who the workers' compensation lawyer or Social Security lawyer was.
Right.
They had not referred those cases to us, but we had been successful in those cases. So for each one of the big heavy hitter Social Security workers' compensation lawyers, we pulled down a list of all of their clients that we had represented. We had a column that showed the result that we got, and the third column was the big one. It showed what their referral fee would have been had they simply sent it to us.
Yep.
And so we started setting up meetings with these practitioners, and we also knew that you couldn't go in and say, wow, you missed all this.
Right.
It was, these folks just came to us. We don't know why. And look, we're not here to tell you we're going to go back and look at all your files. All we want to talk to you about is the future.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, we were able to build these relationships. And I always talked about the workers' comp Social Security practice, this administrative law practice, as the cherry tree from which we could pick the ripe fruit. And so that's how we wound up building this practice. It was not built on an advertising model. It was a relationship model that was tailored to a very niche market.
Yep.
But we identified it and we exploited it because the other thing we had going for us was, again, Lee and I had grown up in the area where most of these clients were coming from. We had the same accent, which I'm sure anyone listening to this is going to say, where's that guy from? When we started talking to these clients, they're like, oh, this isn't some snooty lawyer that thinks he's better than me and going to try to do me a favor. West Virginia being such a small state, it didn't take 3 or 4 minutes before you knew 5 of the same people. The kickoff was when I said, okay, I want to take what I learned at the Social Security workers' comp practice at a smaller level, and I want to take it to the next level. I want to go statewide with that because I think it can work. And I don't take full credit for that. Lee Javins and I were both chatting about it. So we both had we came from the same background. He had never worked in one of these practices like I had worked, where they did the Social Security workers' comp for the plaintiffs.
Right.
But he knew because he grew up in the same spots that
Right.
there were these firms out there. So that was the first key. The second pivotal thing that I learned early on was at the same time that Lee and I were moving the firm into this marketing direction, one of the pitfalls that a lot of law firms can fall into is it's one thing to be successful. It's another thing to be successful for a long time.
Right.
I think anyone can have a great case that comes to the door and you have a home run. It's like baseball. You can have a 5-game winning streak where nothing's going wrong. One of the things that happened very early in our firm after I joined was the firm had been fairly successful. However, the partner at that point that was running the show, you can assume things were always going to be the same way. And so all of a sudden, there was expansion in office space, expansion in staff, and you can justify a lot of things when you can, quote unquote, write them off.
Right.
So we were not lean whatsoever. And not long afterwards, we continued to even maybe grow in some fashion. But when you look at your lines and your expenses and so forth, you could find you have grown too big too fast. It gets to the point where, as 2 fairly young men, we had to restructure the whole thing. Thank God both of us had finance degrees as well. But I will tell you, as 2 young lawyers, we had to go in, and I think he finally got to the point where he was like, yeah, why don't you guys have a look at this? But it was tough. So I can not only tell you how to maybe have a vision to maybe grow something, I can also tell you, if you don't have a vision and you just head down, keep pushing forward, you can overdo it.
Yeah. All right. I'm curious. So you and Lee literally hopped in the car and drove around the state meeting with workers' comp and Social Security disability firms?
Yep, we sure did. We
Interesting.
knocked on doors, set up meetings. One meeting in particular I can remember, and this one lawyer wound up referring us. Oh my God, I cannot tell you how much business he wound up referring us. But I can remember, and he was from my neck of the woods, and I can remember sliding this piece of paper across the table, and he literally rocked back in his chair. I thought he was going to fall off his chair. And he's just, within moments, he had all his legal assistants basically in the office. So tell me what they need to know so that they can send you a fax when these calls came in. He was at a party one time, and he literally said, if my wife and Tim Bailey were drowning in the pool at the same time, I'd probably save him
Tim
first.
coming out first. Sorry, honey.
Needless to say, they wound up getting divorced, not that time, but a little bit later. But anyway, yeah,
Now, are you still friends?
he passed away.
Oh, okay. Sorry to hear that. Yeah. And just out of curiosity, and I don't know if you recall, but round numbers and as a factor of growth. So after you and Lee did the tour of West Virginia, what sort of growth did the firm enjoy?
Oh, I'd say within 2 years, we doubled, and we still bear the fruits of that, even though they've changed the workers' comp practice in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened now is the firm has represented so many people in these type of cases that the few workers' compensation practitioners that are left out there, a lot of them still send us their work. And then within the mining and the timbering culture and so forth, and of course, now you've got social media, you've got websites, there's not as much relationship business as there used to be, simply because there were legislative changes in the workers' compensation practice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now it's been more than a decade ago. And as a result of that, there are very few of those lawyers left. You simply, on the plaintiff side, in fact, I'll tell you what we've done. This is talking about finding your niche market.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that one of the best ways to get these cases is these folks need to find a lawyer to do their workers' comp Social Security. They're stopping it. They're not doing it anymore. One of the practitioners, fabulous lawyer, had been doing it for decades. She had referred us so many cases that when she was about to consider getting out of the practice, we made a decision that even though it might not be a way to make a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
our clients needed that help. So we had her join our firm. And we are one of the few firms in West Virginia now that market and has a workers' compensation practice. And it is solely our clients, as we're litigating their civil case, we provide them that service it is definitely not a moneymaker.
Right.
But we also know that if we're over here litigating a civil case, and if we don't have a good lawyer representing the worker,
Yep.
the defense in the workers' compensation case can get the damages, for instance, in your PI case.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like we're covering our flank.
Yep.
So we're covering our flank in the PI case. We're also using that as a marketing tool because, like I said, these people don't know if they've got a product liability case. They don't know if they can sue their employer, or if it was another construction firm on the site under a multi-employer worksite policy under OSHA where they have a right to go after another defendant.
Yep.
They just know they need help. So we made a decision. And I think in the practice of law, sometimes you can actually have your cake and eat it too. You can make a decision that's truly for the benefit of your clients and truly can also benefit your practice.
Right.
And so that's the way we've approached it.
So at the end of the day, you really just need to get in front of these people to educate them.
Exactly. If they tell us what happened, then we can do the analysis. That's how we built it.
Okay. And at the end of the day, you're doing the tough work, the heavy lifting in the workers' comp area, but also could greatly benefit the client, the injured worker, with a civil case.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that when they gutted the workers' compensation practice in West Virginia, workers now cannot find, when I tell you that the number of workers' compensation practitioners in the state of West Virginia now, you could put them all in a minivan.
Really? No kidding.
No
Wow.
kidding.
Okay. All right. And actually, that's a good segue to the next portion of our conversation. Scaling a law firm isn't necessarily just about winning cases. Of course, that helps, but it's not just simply about winning and winning cases. It's about building a business foundation. It's about marketing effectively and managing resources wisely. The managing partner aspect of managing a firm, running a firm. Many attorneys struggle with that transition from legal practitioner to being a business leader. Tim, you've done both successfully. Talk a little bit about what it takes to take that skill set that you've acquired through your undergraduate, your law school, time in law school, and then eventually as a legal practitioner. Talk about how it's lent itself to being a successful managing partner.
Success, I guess, is all relative. If success is I'm still around.
As is the firm and doing well.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's most important in growing a law firm is stability. You can't have a lot of turnover with your lawyers. You can't have a lot of turnover with your staff. So you've got to figure out how to create a work environment where people can be successful. So the first thing, while it doesn't sound like it's a business strategy, it sounds more like a philosophical strategy or an idea. But I think it's important. You have to figure out how you're going to have lawyers that are going to come to work with you and how they want to stay and how they want to be successful and do good work and help clients like you do. You have to find legal assistants and secretaries that buy in as well. Mm-hmm. Now, no one is going to sign on with you and stay with you just because you're a good lawyer, just because you pay them a good salary. They'll stay for a while. So one of the things that we have done over the years is we have worked really hard to keep good staff. My paralegal, who just retired last year in 2024, she was with me from 1992.
Wow.
It's not unusual to have a 15-year, 20-year paralegal at our law firm. We are family-oriented. If you really think that cracking the whip on the folks that work with you is going to pay off in the long run, I don't agree with that. My dad taught me that. My dad was a boss in a coal mine. He started in the union. And everywhere my dad worked, he treated the men that worked for him with dignity. If they had a family problem, he helped them work through it. A lot of the bosses in the mines treated men like garbage.
Yeah.
And my dad, everywhere he went, he would treat those men with dignity and not crack the whip like some had done. And they would set tonnage records. And the number of safety violations would go down. And they would say that they would give their all to him because he took care of them. And so I learned that from my dad. And I will tell you, I go to places back home, church or some funeral somewhere, and people walk up to me and say, "Are you Stan Bailey's boy?"
Still to this day, you're Stan Bailey's boy.
And they will say, "That was the finest man I ever worked for." So you've got to understand that if you want the most from people, you got to give your most back.
Right.
So as Danny DeVito said, I think it was in War of the Roses when he was explaining divorce.
Yeah.
Be generous to the point of night sweats. Now, you can't be taken advantage of.
No.
But you have to think through, am I better off to hire 3 paralegals and reteach them all my cases in the next 3 or 4 years? Or am I better off to get a really good paralegal and work with that paralegal's family and schedule and life? That paralegal is going to develop a rapport with your clients. And then they feel stable and they don't bolt from you. The lawyers, the same thing happens. Lee and I talked about it. Our goal, neither one of us want to die at that law office. And if you're taking all the money out of that place and you're not helping the people that you hired grow as young lawyers, you got to give them educational opportunities to go and learn from the best. So you join organizations where they can go learn to do depositions at a high level. The other thing is you give them opportunities to where they realize if I stay, there is room for me to move up, and eventually, maybe, if I'm good enough at it, I might have shares at some point. Mm-hmm. But if they look up and they see that the 2 guys at the top or the 3 guys at the top are still sucking all the money out, and no one ever gets any shares except those guys, and they're going to stay too long, at some point after they build their own book of business, they're going to do what I did
Absolutely.
when I built my book of business back at the workers' comp Social Security practice. They're going to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you lose all those people, then you look around, and when you're 65 and you wish you could get out, you're stuck. You're staying there. Now, look, there are people out there, that's the way they want to live their lives. I get it. I understand it. It's not my model, not been Lee's model. And the newest partner, we got 2 new partners, J.R. Carter and Ryan Stewart. Oh, and Taylor Norman just got shares. Perfect example. We brought Taylor on, and Taylor just got shares. And the thing is, he knew that if he worked his butt off, that he could stay, not only stay, but he could move up that ladder. And he's been a tremendous success story. Just tried a case that got a $7 million verdict. So we got a great bunch of lawyers. But we planned and understood that there had to be, and we had to make room. If we wanted to have a solid product, you have to have stability and continuity.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you may want to decide, versus buying a new beach house or a new Escalade, what you need to do is you need to think about that associate and whether or not you want to replace them. The other thing you learn, however, is the difficult side of building and bringing on people is you have to be tolerant when mistakes are made.
Right.
Look, no one's perfect. And from a paralegal to an associate, the only thing that I want, and anyone else should ask is, if you're building a firm, is they have to know it. They have to feel secure in their culture. They have to know that, I tell them this, if you hit the wall with your hair on fire, I'm okay with that. Most of the things that happen are fixable. It sometimes could be a pain to fix them. But if you're giving it your all, now, if you've made a mistake because you're half-assing it, because you don't care, now we'll have a problem then. You know, in sports, if you got a quarterback that thinks that every time he throws an interception, he's going to get pulled, he's going to get tentative, he doesn't make that play.
Nope.
So you have to give them room to grow, and you got to give them enough rope not to hang themselves, but to maybe get a little bit of a jerk back every once in a while, and you can help them out. So that's something that we learned as we worked through the building and the practice. We are very proud that as a plaintiff's practice, we have always offered benefits packages that are as good or better than any of the big defense firms. We will tell folks, we may be able to pay you a little bit less in salary, but don't worry about it. When you go to the hospital, you're covered. And when I say best coverage, Cadillac coverage, 401k. That's one of the things Lee and I did. We put a 401k in with employer match and profit sharing. You've got to take care of the people that make you look good. If you don't, you ain't going to make it. You will find yourself alone beside the road.
I know. And that's often, I've heard that being in this industry for 30 years. I've heard that. That's often a knock on plaintiffs' firms with new attorneys. They go to defense firms because of the security that it offers them. With plaintiffs' firms, it's just not, in most cases, it's not as secure. So that's good to hear. Let's talk a little bit about marketing, Tim. What role has marketing the practice worked in terms of establishing the firm's reputation?
Early on, the marketing was the roadshow, and it was word of mouth. Now, what changed was when Al Gore created the web, and then you were able to do websites. With a website, you're able to provide a lot more content. When you're down to a yellow page and you're looking at a half page, full page, double spread, back cover, whatever you're doing, however much money you're spending, you don't have an opportunity to educate potential clients when you're in a niche market like we're in. A website, however, does allow you a lot more of an opportunity to give that education.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, if I look at the results of my website hits and I look at why are people coming to see us, then I respond to that and make that information out there available. You all know this. Once you get them to the site and you can get them curious enough, then they may click, because on that workers' comp site, it may say, and oh, by the way, we'd love to look at your workers' comp case, but did you understand? You may have another case that may be worth magnitudes more than your workers' compensation claim. Click here, and you may find out a little bit about it. Boom, click. So that's made a huge difference. Social media, in addition to being able to have a Facebook page or Instagram, X, all the things you can do, one of the things I like about that one is I think if you really have a niche event or something that you're really looking to find clients, I think that allows you to even drill down deeper and get to folks, because we know, unlike a websites, yeah, people can click the button and share and send it to someone. But that's not, I think, as natural as if someone looks at an ad or a contact or something that's on their Facebook page and they just say, wow, I didn't know that. I got a bunch of buddies that work up there. Then they hit share, and they don't even have to decide they're going to send it to Joe and Jill, and they don't have to make that decision. They just share it to their friends, all their friends. And so all of a sudden, those folks get it, and maybe some other folks that they didn't even realize needed that help get it. So I think that's helped a lot. The question you got is, how can you, as a small, medium, regional, statewide, how do you compete now with law firms? You had to figure out how many points, how much money do you have to invest to get enough saturation into that market to where when something happens, your name goes from the back of the head to the front of the head and into fingers that either dial a phone or go to a website.
Yes, understood. Tim, what's one mistake law firms, plaintiffs' firms specifically, making when it comes to growth and sustainability? Utter that word.
I think a lot of the ones that I see make the big mistakes, you get out over your skis. Once again, I think the lesson that we learned early on in our practice, the one I told you about before,
Yep.
You can get a couple of big hits. You can have a couple of really good years, and you can decide at that point, man, we have made it. You may need to do some more laps around the track before you decide you've made it. I think that's a big mistake. I think you have to really sit back and think about, you got to look at 5 years. If you've had a couple of good years, but the 2 or 3 before were not so good, they still matter. If you look back at 5 years and everything is just great, maybe, and if you've got so much work, I mean, you have to staff the work. One of the big pitfalls right now that I see is, especially on the plaintiff side, every time you turn around, there is a new mass tort that's out there.
Yep.
And so it's a medical device, it's a drug, it's a chemical, and a weed killer. These are great claims. I'm not critical of those. We've done some of those in the past. But the marketing folks that are doing the websites and the pay-per-click, and they're going to screen those cases for you, and they're going to convince you that with a minimal investment, you can maybe get a piece of one of these cases. You need to be very careful, because once you get in, do you have the staff? Can you field the calls? Are you set up to do that? Folks will tell you that, we'll screen them for you. Now, look, my experience on that is, well, frankly, not very good. Honestly, if you just want to gather up and walk into a meeting and say, I've got 10,000 of these cases. Now, do you have 10,000 good cases? Or do you have 9,500 cases where someone can simply say, I took that drug,
Right.
and you only have 50 or 100 cases where someone actually has an injury?
Right.
At some point, somebody has got to go through those and figure out what's good and what's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And if you aren't staffed up to do it, with that an investment to do that, then what you wind up doing is you're going to offload them to someone else.
Yeah.
They're going to do it. And guess what? They're not going to do it for free.
No.
I'm not saying this is not a don't do mass torts. If you're going to do mass torts, take some time to figure out how they make the sausage. Okay. You need to understand how the sausage is made. It can be extremely successful. I have so many friends that they're amazing. I marvel at the work that they do in mass torts. I so much appreciate what they do, and absolute hats off to them. But I see a lot of small firms, young firms, anyone can go to a seminar and think that it's easy. Maybe not.
They think they found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
And the friends that you were referring to, not asking for them specifically, but these are attorneys and firms that are established, have resources, and have done it before.
These are firms that have a track record. They're staffed.
Right.
When they stand up in front of a judge and they say, hey, we want a leadership role in this particular case, the judge looks over and he's like, oh my, you've got financial resources. They can't outspend you. You've got lawyers that can do it. You've got lawyers that have done it already.
Right.
You've already done these sort of things. Hats off. They have made the investment. They've decided in looking into the mirror what they want to be and how they're going to get there. They've done it. And hats off. Hats off.
And I'm sure in every instance, they paid their dues. They didn't stumble into it.
They took risk early on.
Yep.
And, what a lot of those firms have done is, they may have got in early on and worked a case. And when they made their first bit of money, they didn't go out and blow it. They decided to invest it in the next case. And what happens is eventually, if you do good work and that's what matters, then you kind of move up the totem pole. Right. And then because you've done good work, you get a better cut the next time, you make more money. Then the next time, not only can you do some work, but you can also say, I can throw in some money towards all these expenses. And then you work your way up by doing what? By working hard, doing good work, and at some point being able to put your money where your mouth is.
Okay. Very good. All right, Tim, let's talk a little bit. You've talked about this already, but I'd like to focus in on it a little bit. Number one, because I think it is very important in terms of growing a law firm, but also because you've got a proven track record for doing this. Not only the firm at Bailey, Javins Carter, but you specifically as a managing partner at Bailey, Javins Carter for so many years. Beyond strategy, culture and leadership really play a massive role in terms of a law firm's success. The way that a firm operates internally affects everything. You talked about it yourself, client satisfaction to employee retention. Talk a little bit about, as a partner, what's been your leadership philosophy in managing your law firm?
I don't think I've ever ruled it like Oz. I'm at the top. I don't really ever recall a situation where I've dictated. I had great partners. So first of all, it was major decisions at law firm. I wasn't making those major decisions on my own. Once again, Lee was right there. JR was right there. Ryan has been there. And as I've stepped out of that role, eventually, nobody wants to do that forever.
Yeah.
So first of all, the firm was small enough that when you call me the managing partner, the managing member, it's a little bit of a misnomer. I managed the headaches on a day-to-day basis that nobody else wanted to fool with. On other decisions, we'd bring that information back, and then we would round table it, and we'd make a decision. We were small enough that a partners meeting, I could pop into Lee's office and tell him to buzz down at the end of the hallway and have JR come down and Ryan, and we need to work through this. And so we'd come down. I would definitely say collaborative would be one of the ways that we managed the firm. I didn't feel like I was making major decisions on my own. We were also smart enough as a group to realize that we didn't know everything. We listened to our lawyers. So we have a fabulous tax lawyer. We have a fabulous accounting firm. On matters of HR, we would go seek advice from a firm that's been taking care of us on HR matters for years. So good leaders sometimes surround themselves with folks that know more about an issue than they do.
Absolutely.
So we've done that. We actually had an honest to goodness, big time, if you're a small firm, but we had a year-end meeting where we brought in our bankers, our insurance people, our web people. Oh gosh, I was just trying to think if ever our health insurance folks would come in. We met face to face. Our 401k folks, we bring them in. So we had a full agenda, and we would have everyone come in, report. We'd make decisions for the coming year, try to plan, try to be collaborative, but also listen to the folks around us. So that's probably what I'd say is, I don't know if I had a leadership style other than probably a lot like my dad. I tried not to walk around there like I was truly running the show. I was just minding the store.
What advice would you give a young attorney that, I say young attorney, maybe an attorney that's been out of law school for 2, 3, 5, 7 years? What advice would you give them if they're looking to transition, as you did, from a solo practitioner to joining a firm?
There's trade-offs. You have to think about, what you're giving up and what you're getting. When you're on your own, you're on your own. It means you can do what you want to. All those decisions, you got the freedom to do whatever you want, good or bad. You also have all that responsibility that if something goes wrong, it's on your head. One of the things you lose when you work on your own, if you don't have close colleagues that are in the same building with you or that, that you're close to, you lose collaboration. But if you come into a firm, you'll give up some of that independence, some of your freedom, but you're also going to get some stability. You're going to have collaborative work with other folks. So you have to decide where you want to be on that spectrum. Are you willing to work with other folks? I think if you're coming in with enough experience that the people that you're going to work with are treating you as a lateral almost, that's a lot easier decision than if you have tried to strike it on your own and you're thinking about, maybe it's not really for me to be on my own. Maybe I would like to go to a firm. If you're going to go into a large firm or a firm where you're not coming in so much as a lateral, but you'll almost be starting over, then, you are back to, that level of freedom is going to be drastically reduced.
Oh, yeah.
It is, I think, more difficult now to hang a shingle than it used to be. It might be easier on the mechanics of it because you don't necessarily have to have a big office staff. You don't really need the office space that you used to need. So all that's there, okay? So that part might be easier to open your own practice. But getting cases now is, in my mind, more difficult. Now you got the web, social media. There are so many sources of information. And you have law firms advertising in your locale that aren't even in your locale.
Yep.
There are law firms that are just, I call them the hunter-gatherers. They just spend all their money on advertising. They bring in all the cases they can, and then they refer them out.
Right.
And those people are spending a whole lot more money on case acquisition than you are. So now, if you want to be a local courthouse lawyer, that's what you want to do. Being solos, it's not, I don't think it's that big of a risk or that big of a plunge. But if you think you're going to build a PI practice as a solo, I think the room's more crowded now than it used to be.
Okay. All right. Let's transition now. Let's talk a little bit about the future. As you're keenly aware, the legal industry is constantly evolving, whether it's technology or shifts in client expectations or just simply how law firms operate. Staying ahead of these trends can make or break a law firm in terms of its long-term success. In your experience, what trends do you see shaping the future for the legal industry for law firms?
The one everybody's talking about, AI.
Yeah.
AI is it. When you're thinking about building a law firm now, and you're thinking about the day-to-day functions of the lawyer, both the partner, the associate, the paralegal, secretary, file clerk, your office manager, every single one of those roles, there is a place where AI can do something that person does and do it well. Mm-hmm. Now, some things it won't do well, but how much time does it take to take hundreds and hundreds of pages of medical records and put them in a chronology, to then do a medical summary, to then be able to ask or think about, okay, now that I've got them in chronological form, I've got all the records here summarized, but really the focus of this case is this one particular medical issue. What do these records tell me about just that? And then based on what the records tell you about that, then I need to learn a little bit about medicine. I need to learn what that means to me as a layperson. I need to figure out how to tell a jury that. How do I dumb that down? So these are all things that for one paralegal to do, how much time will that take? How much time?
Yeah.
So now with AI, now you got to double check these things. That's the other thing about it. Now, don't think that there's a case out there right now that's been reported. Everybody's around the internet. A law firm filed a brief in a case and they let AI do the brief, and every single legal case cited in the brief was a non-existent case.
Oh my God, really?
Horrible situation. So there's a caveat. You got to be careful.
Oh, yeah.
But on some of these things, though, you can dump these things in and it can turn it around in no time. I've got cases, especially on medical research. I'm not a doctor, okay? But I see all these terms. And then what about studies that you'll have one side saying something about an issue and the other side saying, I mediate cases now. And I get documents handed to me from both sides that say, All the medical literature says that this is horrible. All the medical literature the other side says it's not all that bad. And you can take the studies, you can dump them into AI, and you can ask for a recap, and then you can start asking it questions. A lot of the work that your paralegals are doing, some of that can be done by AI. It can actually help you rewrite a brief. If you're an associate, it's a good source to start with as an associate on some of your research.
Yep.
You just got to double check it. So I will tell you that now I don't think AI is the reason you're going to fire a bunch of your staff. I think what you do is you go in, you tell your staff, look, use this as a tool to make you more efficient.
Right.
We can get more done in less time. Let's do it that way. But I think AI is just, it's a game changer. And then the other thing, as we move into the future, I'm having to get used to the fact that with websites and AI, we've always prided ourselves on the personal relationships that we build with our clients. I had a family. I spend time in Atlanta and in Charleston now. I'm between two places to live. And turns out we had a client that was burned, and they were going to come down to have an evaluation down here in Atlanta. And family had to come down here. I had a small child. And I knew it was going to be a long day for this family. So I put them up in a hotel nearby my house and took them out to dinner, took them to the next morning, went to the evaluation with them. The child was, can you imagine sitting in a doctor's office? You know how it is when you're a child. And then when we got done, they couldn't go back into the next day. I said, you know what? She's been great. You guys deserve some family time. Took them over to the Georgia Aquarium and said, here, I'm going to drop you all. You guys go in, spend some time with your daughter, and you just tell me when you want me to come back and pick you up. When we take in clients, I always tell folks, it's not just like Sergeant Friday, Dragnet, just the facts man. Find out about it. Get to know them. Your paralegals, because they're going to talk to the same paralegal all the time. Your paralegals get to know them. People fall in love. When I had two paralegals that worked with me very closely over the years, Terry and Tara, both the clients loved them because they were, first of all, they talked to them for 2 years, okay? So they got to know them. Now, because you're signing everything online, you know, that's the other thing that's changed is I don't have to have, my clients don't have to come to the office anymore. If I need something signed, I got a system, I send it to them, they sign it, pops it right back to me. If I need to talk to them, what are we doing here right now? You didn't come to my house. I didn't come to your office to do this. We're doing it online. Part of me misses some of that interpersonal, that interaction.
Yeah.
However, what I can also say is that's because I'm a certain age. I'm of a certain generation. Hey, if you look at someone that's in their 30s now and in their 20s, they're already used to not having to have the same sort of interactions that you and I want to have.
Right.
And these are the people that literally communicate. They're sitting around the same coffee shop at the same table, texting each other, and they're across the table. So some of this change in how we're using technology, in some ways, for those of us that are older, we're losing something. It could be that there's going to be a whole lot more of those folks getting of age that we need to represent, and they're going to be fine with it. So that's something that, but anyway, I just think AI right now is the big thing, and the national advertising. I think that is just changing the landscape, just between websites and TV. National firms, nothing wrong with it. It's a business model, but it's a fact of life.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe you've already answered this question, but I don't know if you have a little bit more that maybe you could elaborate on. Just closing in terms of our conversation related to marketing and how you manage your practice, what bit of advice would you offer attorneys, law firm owners in terms of looking to the future and the one big shift you think that law firms will need to accommodate, take into consideration in order to stay competitive over, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
On the plaintiff side and the defense side, what I'll tell you, you have to be involved in the political process. So now that doesn't mean you got to be giving money to every candidate rolling around. But if you think you can sit around and not pay attention to what's going on down at your state and federal capitals, you are being very short-sighted. What happens at the national level and the state level could impact your practice. You could all of a sudden wake up tomorrow and some cause of action that I have relied upon forever could be gone.
Yeah.
So you have to keep track of those things. And then you have to think, okay, what's my plan B? Because it can happen. There are a lot of people that I know that used to practice in the medical malpractice world. And with tort reform, they woke up one day, they're not doing that anymore.
No.
Now, what we did, some of the tort reform has happened on our side. If you see everybody getting out, you can consolidate and you can take advantage of that.
Yep.
Now, we did that in our market because, once again, everybody got out of workers' comp. You have to be aware as a lawyer, everything you do comes from a law book, comes from a statute, comes from a regulation that comes out of a legislature. Okay?
Right.
You have to be ready for that, and there's a lot of things going on all over our country, so be ready for that. We've talked about AI. AI is going to impact every decision you make as a law firm on staffing and associates, what you're paying them, how much work you think you're going to get out of them. So I think that's going to play a huge role in decision making. The technology now changes absolutely at such a mind-boggling pace. There are seminars, there are CLEs that you can attend that literally address trends in the practice. And if I was a young person trying to think about how to run a law firm in this new world, I would start looking at websites or CLEs or seminars where they're talking about trends in the practice.
Yep.
And I'll tell you this, you better stay abreast of all the technology that's out there. So there's also places you can go for emerging technologies in the practice of law.
Yeah.
I know whenever I go to the big trial lawyer seminars, these exhibitors, the things that you see that they weren't there, well, they didn't have that 5 years ago. My goodness, some of this stuff they didn't have 12 months ago. So you really do have to make a concerted effort to stay abreast. The law firms that I know that they don't have one lawyer to keep track of all of it. Keep track of it all. So I would tell you, it's changing so fast, you need to dedicate someone to tracking the change for you.
All right. Very good. Tim, thank you. This has been a fantastic conversation, and your insight is, I'm sure, going to be very helpful to any law firm owners or attorneys that are looking to grow their practice that have listened in. So thank you very much.
Oh, man, glad to do it.
For anyone that wants to connect with you or contact you or get in touch with the firm, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just shoot me an email, tbailey, TBAILEY, at BJC, the number 4, the letter U.com. tbailey at BJC4U.com.
All right. Very good. Again, Tim, thank you. I appreciate it. And for you listening, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to The Legal Edge and leave us a review. We will constantly have a steady stream of subject matter experts and legal experts to provide you information to help you grow your law firm. Thanks for tuning in.